Welcome to Redeeming Missions, a podcast from Every Home for Christ about the complexity of Christian missions and evangelism in our time. We host conversations that will challenge us through unique global perspectives and honest stories. Redeeming Missions is a podcast for ministry leaders, passionate evangelists, and the rest of us who might be a little bit more cautious or even disenchanted with the topic. Together, we're on a journey to find the heart of what it means to carry Christ to our world. I'm your host, Tanner Peake, and I'm so glad you're joining me today. Welcome to this episode of Redeeming Missions. I'm super excited today about our guest, Alan Briggs. I think we're in for a really beautiful, a really important conversation. I'm not gonna give it away here on the front end, but Alan, you're a busy man, you're a busy guy. Thank you so much for taking the time, sitting down, having a convo.
Oh man, pumped. Anytime we're talking to leaders about the health of their heart and their soul, their ministry, their business, I'm in. Let's do it.
That's awesome. I mean, our audience is so diverse. We have a diverse audience, a lot of it in the US, millennial, but we have literally people all around the world that are tuning into this. Every Home for Christ is a ministry in 165 different nations.
Incredible.
And so this is being broadcast out there. So I'm excited to have a conversation about the soul, about the soul of our leadership. I think that's beautiful and important. And I think it's going to be super relevant to who we're talking to today. So what we do, every podcast, my favorite part, no question, we start with a little bit of story time. I'm a story guy. That's just me. I think I learn through story. I grow through story. Mm-hmm. It's like the Lord backs into me through story. Mm-hmm. So I want to start just asking you to share a little bit of your story, a little bit of your journey.
Yeah.
What you certainly get to what you do now, get to that point, but start as early as you want. I mean, you can start from your birth story if you want. I mean, you start from wherever seems relevant to you.
Yeah. So I grew up always an adventurist. Like I am an adventurist which I don't even know if that's a word. So in lieu of the mountains, in lieu of relationship and story for me is always an adventure where you sit down and it's tell me about your story.
Yeah.
Who you are matters more than what you do. Tell me where you came from.
Yeah.
Whether it's rural Montana or for me, it was the mountains of Virginia.
Yes.
And grown within a context that Christianity was the norm, but was thin. It wasn't deep. It wasn't thick. It was often lived out in a cultural way. And that just never sat right with me. And as a kid, I just thought, man, there's got to be more. And it wasn't caged as an adventure of faith. And so here are all these adventures that I want to do across the world and growing up, climbing mountains and doing crazy stuff. I still don't know how my parents allowed me to do some of the stuff that I did at an early age. And realizing like my life is an adventure and I think my faith should be too. And so that was the premise. That's still what I get to live out today. And so that risk, that liminal space right in the middle of I know what's next and I'm not sure how this is going to work out. That's how I've lived my life always. And I get to still live it that way. But really carrying that throughout, I thought I was going to live that in a business. And so I started businesses. I've always been an entrepreneur. And so as a kid, I would, leave the grocery store, finding a pocket full of money, and then trade it up for something else. I was employing my friends, employed my brother who was 4 years ahead of me. So I graduated high school and I'm employing my, college graduate brother in a landscaping business. And so
wait, he's older than you?
Oh yeah, 4 years older.
That's a dynamic.
He's about to get married,
Nice.
Worst hiring decision of my life. Didn't have a green thumb. But for me, I literally just saw, man, this is a huge opportunity. There are people who trust me here. And so sort of at the intersection of adventure, where's this business going to go? I'm not even sure why I needed the money, honestly, as a kid. I wasn't like, my parents paid for a bunch of stuff. It wasn't like I needed the money. It was just like, man, I see this is a great way to serve the world. I see this is a great way to serve these people. We're wired for work. And so accidentally, I was developing this theology of work, which of course necessitates a theology of rest and play as well. So both of those have always been true for me. And so I would work my butt off and then I'd go out to the river and go fish, go to the mountains. And so I find myself years later doing very similar things. And so that theme has carried throughout. I headed toward ministry, so that's a whole nother story. I feel like God kind of tricked me into that in college, but I just said, man, I think I'm heading toward church ministry. And so for me, I tried to go towards sort of cooler ways to be able to do that.
I mean, coming from your story, I wonder what was it about ministry that drew you in?
I'd been impacted deeply by a couple of people in ministry, and they did it a different way. It wasn't crusty. It wasn't Southern. It was very honest, in your face. And I just thought, if it's that way, I could do that. But there was also space for it. The entrepreneurial piece that I now know as more apostolic, spiritual starter, entrepreneur. I needed space. I've always just needed some space to do it a little bit differently. And that was not from a rebel sense. Like, I've just always been a quiet disruptor. And so the quiet piece, I'm grateful for like the diplomacy of growing up in the South. You don't really say what you mean, which drives you crazy, but it also put me at tables with people much older than me, learning, man, I think there's a way to actually do this in a way that doesn't offend, which I think has carried into the way I do evangelism through a lot of my work now. To say that, man, there were families that trusted me with the keys to their house when I'm 15, 16 years old. That trusted me with a whole lot more. And so that's been a theme throughout my life, is people trusting me with more ages, years, sometimes decades ahead of what they should have. And so those are some of the threads or themes that I've seen. And I went through college, was thinking, man, I'd like to have some sort of cooler way than heading into the local church. Maybe there's some cool parachurch thing or whatever. And not to be so. The local church, the bride of Christ, was like warts and all. She's still the bride. And so was never really deeply drawn to global missions. The idea, the adventure of it certainly stuck with me, and I was excited about it. But I just went, man, I think I'm supposed to root myself into a place and be good news there and do good work there. And it happened to be through pastoring. But what's interesting is, as I entered pastoring, very quickly, it was like, I'm not the shepherd guy, I'm the equipper. And so people would say things like, Alan, sometimes it looks like you're looking through me. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, but I think it's true, actually.
I don't know what you're saying.
Who are you going to impact? What's next? What are your next right steps? And so, God was bringing me in that direction to begin to be now what I get to do is as a coach. So leadership coach, executive coach, business coach, to ministry leaders or business leaders.
How did that jump happen? So you went from pastor.
God tricked me again.
Yeah. Okay. Let's hear it.
Honestly, I won't say broke as a joke, but almost. And when people call you, people call you and say, "Hey, I heard you coach church planners, and we had launched a residency process. Would you coach me?" And you're just like, "Well, we adopted some kids. Life's pretty expensive. We need money. This is fun and exciting." Sure. I had no idea what I was doing. No, the business side of it was lacking, and it's still, a challenge to be able to keep up sometimes with the impact of what God's doing. And to go, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to. And so people started calling from across the country and asking, would you coach me? What about this? And so it was this strange thing. I didn't know what coaching was. Literally, somebody said, Tanner, Alan, you're like a coach. It's like, yeah, like sports? Yeah, my coach has really impacted me. Like Phil Jackson? Yeah, he sure did it with the Bulls. And they're like, no, like there's an actual thing, a profession called coaching. Like, no way. You could just get paid to like pull things out of people and then invite them into next steps. There's no way that's a profession. I had not heard of it. So honestly, God tricked me into it. But that is where I see the glory of God, is in somebody pulling it out of their story and saying, man, what's in you? What's next? How do you clarify these things? And so I've always been a connector of people, connector of people to their dreams, connector of ideas, and connector of words as an author and a wordsmith. And so those things really converge in coaching.
It seems like that's really adjacent to that trustworthiness. I mean, you have to be trustworthy in order to connect. Actually, even to coach. I mean, you have to be the type of person that can be trustworthy.
I carry secrets for people, not immoral secrets, but like sometimes, hey man, I'm not even sure if I want to talk to my husband or wife about this yet, because like this God dream's scary to me. Or man, I'm thinking about launching this, or I'm thinking about launching 2 other companies here. Is this stupid? Let's talk through this. So I love being in those, kind of divine conversations. And what we say is when clarity goes up, overwhelm goes down.
Yeah,
we live in a culture of overwhelm. So you don't have to solve all the problems. If we can just find clarity, then often people don't even know the question they're asking. We're moving so fast that if we can slow down, and I do these 90-minute coaching sessions, and I promise you, somebody enters in completely overwhelmed, and we can just feel this inverse relationship happening, and clarity's gone up. It's like, well, here's the question I'm asking. Great, I just need to sit with God. on that for a couple weeks. I just need to talk to a couple people about this. But until you even have clarity, we're spinning. And Satan comes to steal, kill, destroy, distract, discourage, any way. And yet, for us, man, when we have clarity, then we can take courage. And so we live in a culture that's like, go for it, man. Take your next step. Do it. That's constantly bringing us toward courage. But we can't have informed courage without clarity. And God is a God of clarity. And so to work sort of the practical and the spiritual meet together, call me a nerd, man. But I nerd out on that and go, that is the best day ever. When somebody has this breakthrough that ultimately is going to lead them to a new ministry, a new country, a new opportunity, a new church, 3 new businesses. Some of the people I coach have the ability to turn these things pretty quickly. They have a lot of resources, teams, finances, whatever it may be.
When you coach, is it specifically leaders? Is it broader than leadership? I mean, what kind of people are you end up coaching?
People of influence. And here's why. Everybody has influence, by the way. So I use the term leader very, very broadly. People that are leading over a family and influencing your kids. I have 4 kids. I take that super seriously. But I want to help change the Christian leadership conversation from striving to abiding. So the question, that's a massive goal. You guys are drawn to this massive goal. It's just every person in the world. That's it. To know about Jesus.
Just every person in the world.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. And so when I think about this massive issue, I'm like, we actually have to do this differently. If we want to literally reform or reshape how we think about leadership, how we think about rest, replenishment, going the long haul, we train people for launch, not for longevity.
That's right.
And so we're going to have to do something differently. Well, for me, how do we get the cascade effect? I work with catalysts who can have the greatest potential impact on that. And so to think through that, currently Sabbatical is a big thing that we're shifting right now. And we're trying to see the Western church understand that rest actually brings long, fruitful work. It's for people who are healthy, not for people who are unhealthy. So we're actually trying to shift that word and that narrative, that story around sabbatical. And so what's that going to take? Man, it's going to take a team of people, but it's really going to take stories that are leveraged, catalysts that can impact other catalysts to go, this actually changed my life. This actually changed my family, as opposed to they sent me on sabbatical. So when you take on big problems, you have to think differently. And we ask this question in coaching, what would have to be true in order to blank? And that is a scary question. I dare you. What would have to be true in order to reach 10 more countries in the next 2 years? And just I can't think the same. I have to think multiplication instead of addition. So frankly, that's why I love to work with people of influence, and also because they often don't have friends. People of influence. Everyone wants something from me all the time. You got a strong reaction
from me on that as a leader.
Heck yeah, whoa, hey there. But literally, it's somebody wants something from me all the time is the phrase I hear from leaders.
Yeah.
And so you go home, answer a few calls, and then your family, all they want is all you got all the time. That's all they're asking for. And just that space that we want to create, whether it's a 90-minute coaching session or 4 days away in the mountains, for a leader to go, here's somebody that wants something for me, not from me. And I want to be that.
I think what you're talking about in terms of rest, sabbatical, health, all of these things really resonate with me, but I'm also aware that a lot of people that catalyst category of individuals or leaders or influencers, these are the people that are almost the least likely to just jump into rest. These are people I would even say addicted to work. I kind of put myself in that category as someone who is highly energized by what I do and putting my head down and grinding.
We love our work. Too. We're drawn to it. There's a mission.
Called to it.
Yeah. And what's interesting is as I study burnout, those are the people burning out.
That's right.
Are actually people who deeply care about our work. And so it's like the healthcare profession, education, ministry, nonprofit work. The people who are not burning out are the people who don't give a rip about their work. And so we think, because I care deeply about this, I won't burn out. But it's actually the opposite, because it's so close to our hearts, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I go to work each day and I get all 4 of those dimensions I get to practice on a regular basis.
Right.
And so just to kind of that's why I want to interrupt there, is because people listening or watching go, oh, that's not me. And it's actually no, that actually makes us more vulnerable.
That's right.
And I have to put up more boundaries.
That's right.
For that, because I'm fully invested, fully engaged, and I can go, and then I can drop quick.
That's right. Let's back up a little bit. I want to make sure we define terms really well before we jump into the burnout conversation. You're in the process of releasing a book specifically dedicated, I think, to the themes that you're talking about right now. And maybe at the end we'll make a reference to, or let you say how people can access this book. We'll put it in the show notes and all of that. But let's back up for a second and talk specifically. Let's give some definition to burnout.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of someone listening to this and they're like, what is that? What's the experience of that? How would I know that I'm burnout? Maybe speak to some of that.
Even what it's not is probably more important than what it is. It's not just, oh, I'm tired.
That's right.
Oh, I need a couple days off. Oh, we all do. It's called a weekend, right?
That's right.
Oh, I need a change of pace. So those things, that's not burnout, although that can expedite, some of those feelings. There are clinical definitions, and then there's sort of normal person relational definitions. Both of those are really helpful. My favorite clinical definition that hits me straight to my heart is voluntary self-exploitation.
Voluntary
exploitation.
Oh, that's a hammer, man. That's a hammer definition.
You can't think about anything else. Don't be present with your family. We need you to work 80 hours a week. But it's us, for whatever reason, that I think I need to, that I think I always need to be working, that I feel bad if I'm, whatever, off in the mountains and my team is still operating or whatever. And so voluntary self-exploitation, that we have allowed it to happen to us. And so we are our worst boss. And if we just see that there's this sort of invitation from the Father there. So that's a clinical definition that I think is helpful. Actually was defined in the mid-'70s, and now I think it's overused, the term burnout. And so there's a reason why we go straight at it for the title and then we work backwards. Some of my favorite definitions, I ask a group of people who have burned out, friends of mine, how would you describe it? And some of them said, ice skating uphill. Trying to climb a mountain in the mud, in the rain, 5 steps forward, 3 steps backward. Like feelings like that. And so I give like kind of a whole section. What is it? And what is it not? And I think it's just important to go like, we all get tired. That's not exactly what we're talking about here. But there's this soul deep need for replenishment where we've let ourselves get worn down. And the great irony of this, Tanner, is that we're the last person to find out.
Yeah. I mean, you usually don't find out until it's too late.
Exactly.
I mean, until you're in a massive meltdown or massive crisis.
And we're here in Colorado where hydration is key. And so when you go up to 10,000 feet or more, if you're thirsty and you feel thirsty, you're done. Because you need to hydrate the few days before then. And so when we think about that, it's the proactive versus reactive nature of it. And so, I mean, it really is. I mean, some have even said that it could be as far as sort of like a even demonic presence in our culture. And I think for some it certainly could be. But like, man, if there's this spirit of overwork, where's it coming from?
Yeah, I was just about to ask you
it's an identity
What's
issue.
the origin? And when you put it in terms of self-exploitation, it's like, why would anybody purposely to exploit themselves? So it makes me wonder. I mean, I step back and think, where on earth is that coming from? That we would actually be, it's almost like seduced into this kind of burnout
That's a
space.
good word. Yeah, because it's not a good idea. Our brains, it doesn't even make sense.
Idea, of course,
it doesn't even make sense, which makes me believe that's more within our heart and our soul. We're working for our identity instead of from it.
Yeah,
and so on that side of it, to say like, as a person of Jesus, I get to go at the end of the day. I don't know about you, but most times at the end of the week, whether you're a knowledge worker or whether you're in ministry, like we don't have something to go like, I created these widgets and they're beautiful. I have a friend that makes like $6,000 tables and he can be like, I made this, I sold it, they're happy, I have money. And we're like, I helped people with these ideas and I push these things forward in the world, but knowledge workers struggle a lot with it. Ministry workers do a lot too, because we have nothing to physically say, yes, I put my hands on this. So it makes us, again, more vulnerable. But at the end of the week, to know that most weeks, even like we're recording this at the end of the week, and I'm likely to think, I'm not even sure I had much impact that week. What did I even do? I sent some emails around, I recorded some podcasts, I had some conversations, but I'm not even sure this is making a huge difference, right? That's fatigue speaking. And that's identity and insecurity going like, man, maybe I didn't have an impact. Maybe I should just do everybody a favor and quit. And that's like running through my mind almost every weekend.
Wow.
Where I'm like, I'm not even sure. And that's as somebody who's confident about my calling, literally people telling me coaching is changing my life. And this message is incredible. And so just to know we are so easily deceived and our identity is like, do more, work for more, prove this, mark something off of your list. And that is literal trust at the end of each week to go like, I've done this week what I was invited to do. And that's it. And so I think it has to at some point come down to trust. Working from identity, not for it as kids of the King. To go like, man, I mean, Ephesians 2:10, that is our verse. And we start from that is to say that first we're his workmanship, and then we've got works to do. Like we're his craftsmanship, and then God invites us to be co-designers after that. But like if we don't get the first one right, then we're thinking like, certainly if I do enough, I'll get love. Whoa, in what relationship on earth is that healthy?
Yeah,
hold on.
That's not
a
healthy relationship.
You know? Versus like, man, I don't have this pressure. If I don't bring my wife flowers, if I don't ask her, to clarify, hey, date night, we really need to jump on it. And like, that's because I love, not so I'll get love. And I just think we need to have that conversation. And as people of Jesus, I think we got to start there. I coach a lot of people who are not people of Jesus. That's a harder conversation. But to go like, man, we either believe that on a regular basis or we don't. And my faith and hope and optimism wear down as my energy wears down.
I like your definition of ice skating uphill. Not that I've ever tried to do that. I mean, my wife is coming from
Asking
like
for
an
a
ice skating.
friend.
Yeah, right. No, I actually think as you're speaking, it actually resonates. I mean, I can think of times actually in my journey as a leader where I'm positive I was experiencing burnout. And like yourself, I probably have some of the same thoughts at the end of the week. But I wonder what other symptoms. I mean, just thinking of like the person who's listening to this, maybe they feel that strange tug or that burning in their chest as you're speaking, and they're going, oh no, I think I might be experiencing burnout. How about some other symptoms? How about some other, I mean, you just gave one, your story about your own journey or, the end of the week, the fatigue coming in. What are other examples of symptoms? If someone is going, hey, I need to know where I'm at on this, what else could they
creatively flat? So by the way, every leader, let me look into the camera for this one. You are a communicator if you're a leader. Whether you are regularly creating content or being on stages, you are a communicator. Leaders, you are a decision maker. And so, I mean, really the job of a leader is to make decisions and to work through teams to accomplish a mission. And more developer than it is doer, really with that. And that's actually one of the shifts I cover in the book is from doer to developer. I have to do it all to like, I develop the right people to be able to do it all. And so decision fatigue is one of those. I'm making decisions either too fast or I'm procrastinating in those. Creatively flat, not thinking through fresh ideas, things that used to excite you don't excite you anymore. And so those are some of the subtle things where you're like, oh man, I need to be really careful. More than just a vacation, right, on that. And so we're in kind of the end of the school year as we record this too. And there's like a month that for me, I just like basically drive my kids around.
Yeah, May.
I'm like a full-time bus driver.
I clear my schedule in May because I'm like every band concert, every track meet, every sporting event, every golf thing.
Seriously.
You're so right. May is like a burnout month.
Yeah. And so you look at it and literally there's actually parental burnout is one of the terms people are throwing around, which is wild. And so it requires resistance all the time. And Walter Brueggemann talks about Sabbath as resistance. Literally, it is resistance. And so if we're letting our devices, we're letting marketing, we're letting friendships, we're letting other people determine the yeses and nos for our life, heads up. So if you feel like your life's a treadmill right there, then that is both a sign of burnout and it will induce burnout even faster. To go like, my life's running me. I just open my calendar, go, what the heck do I even have today? Why am I doing this? Here's something that's fascinating to me, is burnout is actually often people who are overworked and underwhelmed, i.e. bored.
Wow.
Many times people who are burning out are actually over-leveraged in their schedule and they're bored.
Wow.
Because it's hitting at such a shallow level. So they're answering too many emails, they're in too many meetings, but feeling very little fulfillment from it. So the more I get down and study this with leaders and the research, as I go, wow, like our culture is actually programmed for this, right? So much good, but very little best. And so as we lead, we have more opportunities. So you do things with excellence. I hate to tell you, you're going to get more opportunities.
That's right.
So as you move up on a ladder, you do things with excellence on an org chart or whatever that is, people are going to ask you to do more, not less. That's the trick nobody trains you for. That means you're going to have to say more no's. Your filters are going to have to get tighter. and you're going to have people around you to help you with these other things. And when we think through that to go like, man, is that the reward we get for being a great leader? Doing things with excellence is more. So the decision early in leadership is between good and best, between good and bad. The more we progress, it's actually between good and best. Every opportunity coming to you or me is good at this point.
Yeah.
There's not any bad opportunities flying our way. It's literally between good and best. And so I would just encourage you, if you're a leader of influence, capital I influence especially, is create every opportunity as guilty until proven innocent.
Wow.
Guilty
Say more
until
about
proven
that.
innocent, especially ongoing, recurring. You say yes to one recurring meeting with somebody that's like, hey, man, will you mentor me? You don't even know what that means, but there's expectations loaded with that. It's every Tuesday until the end of time.
Oof.
And you look and you're like, man, you start adding up that time, that's huge. But actually, we have to think energy. The currency of leadership is energy, not time. Energy, not time. 5 minutes of the right thing can solve a problem.
Gosh, you're just smacking me right in the face. I mean, I'm a leader and I'm like listening to this and I'm making my own checklist in my mind.
And everybody else, it's all of us that we've just thought enough time thrown at this. But I mean, I could be scrolling for 5 hours in the next room, or I could be looking into my kids' eyes for 10 minutes. We do Thursday fun night. We're recording this on a Thursday. So I go through my daily schedule and honestly, I'm planning for this time. What are we going to talk through here? But I'm also like, man, I don't have a plan for Thursday fun night. Now I do. And so to think through, that's something I do with my kids that we look forward to each week. And so to me to go, man, that's a priority for me to think proactively versus a last minute, I don't know, we'll just do something. And so I just want to encourage listeners to think through what's my best energy going toward, not just my time. So one of the shifts, Tanner, that we encourage people to think through in the book, and I coach leaders through for months often to get, is moving from time management to energy investment. Where are we investing our energy? The rich think investment, not spending. So we think, how do I spend time? No, how do I invest energy? Because that moves things up the chain. That solves problems. That gives the right amount of my energy to the right things within that. And how do we think multiplication instead of addition? Everybody uses this phrase, how do I add value? I'm like, stop adding value, start multiplying it. How do I think multiplicative environments that are literally just wearing us down, whether we're in sales or you're pastoring or you're starting a company, you're starting some cool kingdom venture. How do I think multiplication? And right now we record a conversation once and thousands of people get to hear it. That to me is good multiplication. Cheers. We're living that out.
That's right.
The Discovery Method is an easy-to-use discipleship curriculum created by Every Home that is designed to make the Bible accessible to everyone, regardless of background, education, or culture. In the past year, 21 million people responded to the gospel message as a result of Every Home's ministry around the globe. You can equip local leaders with the Discovery Method to help new believers grow in their faith. Partner with us today at everyhome.org/discovery.
If someone's listening to this, I mean, you just gave kind of the diagnostic for the, again, I just know, I mean, I feel a little bit myself, that burning in your chest, and you go, I'm wondering if I'm experiencing burnout. You've given some kind of the diagnostic. I can self-diagnose here, maybe some of my burnout. But they're wanting to know practically, what do I do? I mean, I'm just thinking, I always think the least common denominator. And so I think we have listeners right now who are going to be stay-at-home moms. And they're feeling burnout. I mean, they have little kids and they're feeling emotionally, creatively flat. They're not excited. They're bored. So let's just think of like the least common denominator, or maybe it could be as a leader as well. So maybe try to cover as much as you can. But what would you say, some really practical, practical things that they can do today that would help them maybe journey out of burnout or something like that?
Clarity. Where am I? And if these three words I hear all the time as a leadership coach: stuck, overwhelmed, exhausted. That's how it presents.
Stuck, overwhelmed, exhausted.
Stuck, overwhelmed, exhausted. If you're feeling that, time out, hold on. Or you're feeling that my life's on a treadmill. And the only thing I can do is just punch it harder, run faster, but I'm not sure when I can jump off of this. So you're starting there. I would encourage you to think about your drains and fills, greens and reds in your life. What are drains? And the goal is not to make life easy here. Let me just say that. It is lighter. The subtitle is a lighter way to live and lead in a heavy world. Like, let's just say our world is heavy.
That's right.
I wake up and Alexa tells me there's a war going on in the Middle East.
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
right.
Right? There are real people associated with that who I know. It's heavy. It's real. But when you think about it, how can we take things out of our pack? The easiest way to start is identify drains and fills. And it's a little bit like learning clutch. And so if the gas and the clutch move at the right pace, you're not going to stall out. And so sometimes it's like, I got to stop doing all these things. No, I believe here in evolution instead of revolution. There are times to quickly make a big change. But mostly it's to say, what would it look like to do 5% more of these things? Again, I'm realistic. I live in the real world. What would it look like to do 5% more of the things that refill me? And that could be cheap. That could be easy. I took a 2-mile hike this morning before we're here, so I'm pretty charged up, ready to go. That's a win for me every time, right? Body, heart, soul, get out in creation. We live in Colorado. Hello. I have no excuse not to. And so more of your fills, less of your drains. Here's the challenge. There are people who are drains and there are people who are fills. You know that's true.
That's the truth.
Literally. And so do not tell them they're a drain person. But the reality is...
you're a red, just so you know, you're a red, not a green.
That's going to be a no.
Yeah.
But when that person says, hey, you want to get together, you literally go, man, not all people and relationships in your life are going to be fills for you, and not all are going to be drains. And so I think it's helpful to go, man, I may need to meet with this person, and that may be part of your work. But if you give them more or the same as the squeaky wheel, in every organization, there's some bit of a squeaky wheel. Whether it's the person that gives you a 1-star review or whether it's that staff member you're constantly just trying to appease. The reality is, who are the people that are creating lots of impact, you have chemistry with, the friendships that give you life, more of that. And to shift over, when I do sabbatical coaching, we talk about get-tos and have-tos. There are people in your life that's a get-to. I want to pick up the phone when Trevor calls. He's just a life giver. I don't really know why, but he's just that guy. There are other people that I'm like, I'll talk to him Monday. That's a lot of details. And just to not feel bad about that. To say that, okay, as we move this, it may take 6 weeks. There's something about 6 weeks, Tanner, that when we are doing some elimination of this and we're adding some of the right things, about 6 weeks is often what it takes from feeling pretty deplenished to feeling replenished.
That is as practical, as it gets. I think what you said, something that sticks out. I'm a leader. I think of the average Every Home for Christ person who might be listening to this, a leader in East Watini or someplace like that. Sometimes you feel a little bit guilty, that you feel like almost like you're pulled into your drain, those things that are draining. You feel guilty for even finding the things that fill you up.
Yeah.
Where do you think that comes from? I'm just speaking that from experience. I think I feel, if I go fill myself up, I feel a little guilty. I feel like maybe I'm not leading in the way that God asked me to lead. Yeah. Is that temperamental? Is that personality? Is that some kind of lie I'm buying into? Where's that coming from? I'm asking that, again, asking for a friend.
Such a good question. Asking for a friend. Let's just go straight to the source here. Jesus took naps.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, that to me is like, that shirt, be like Jesus. Jesus took naps. Jesus got away from the crowds that he had the answer to what they needed.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, if our mentor, Jesus of Nazareth, can get away, and by the way, there's so many stories, I'm sure, of the guys just hanging out that we don't hear.
That's right.
Who had really 3 years. He had 10% of his life to do ministry. How much more do we need to pace ourselves? And he was the Son of God. How much more do we need to go, whoa? So we've misunderstood this culturally. I think some of it is from family of origin. Some of it is from misunderstanding sacrifice. Some of it is from knowing, here's what's in my bucket, and here's what's in God's bucket, and here's what's in everybody else's. To find those 3 buckets, it'll change your life. To go like, man, when I'm insecure, I try to do God's job. It doesn't work very well for me or
never.
for them.
Yeah.
Or somebody else's bucket. It's called overfunctioning.
Yeah.
Talk to your counselor about it. They would love to tell you more
I
about
love that.
Right?
I go to therapy every other week. That's
Yeah.
my next therapy session is overfunctioning.
Where am I overfunctioning for, family or kids or team? And I've tried to make stuff work before for whether it's employees that it's like they just don't have what we need in this season. And it's my issue, not theirs, that I'm going, I just don't think it's a fit right now. We don't have this. That's okay. But man, I make it harder on myself there. So I just think when we just understand those 3 buckets, again, I try to get as practical as possible.
Say those again, those 3 buckets.
What's in my bucket?
Yeah.
What does God ask me to take care of?
Yeah.
And then what's in God's bucket that only God can do?
Yeah.
And which is key, by the way, to any evangelism conversation.
That's right.
And then what's in everybody else's bucket? What's in their bucket? And there are times when it's like, man, I feel bad for that person, so I'm going to overfunction there. Or I feel insecure. I feel like God's not doing it fast enough, so I'm going to try to be God for a second. And we would never say that out loud. Never. Heresy. And yet we do it. And so I just think, man, when I know here's what is in my priority zone. What I love about boundaries and what I hate about boundaries is that it's like, Alan, you're actually not as important as you think. Put your laptop down and go have fun with your kids. It's like, hey, guess what? Like God's spinning the world just fine on his finger without us. It turns out. It's crazy. I need that message, and then everyone else needs that message as well from me. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I can rest in that. So I just think our theology on paper is pretty good, but I just think our lived theology is really poor and impoverished. And I'm relearning theology as I choose, like, hey, there's this thing called Sabbath. And so I just, like, I can't talk about this conversation without talking about Sabbath, is that there are not many silver bullets in Scripture. I see maybe 2. Discipleship and Sabbath.
Wow.
Make disciples, become disciples, and Sabbath. And it is a great gift that sustained the Jewish people for millennia that we're just catching up to, us Gentiles.
Yeah, man, I'm going to connect a couple things that you just said. I'm thinking about impoverished ministry or impoverished evangelism.
Yes. And poverty starts with a mindset.
Yeah,
it's not about money. It's about mindset. It's about thinking. And so if I can never take a break, my business needs me, my ministry needs me, whatever, that's poverty. Because it's the mindset that I couldn't. It doesn't matter if you're having tons of impact, you have tons of funding, whatever. I could never stop blank. Poverty's a mindset.
Wow. And then, I mean, you got impoverished parenting. I mean, I'm thinking of like helicopter parenting, which I'm not sure our entire audience would know that. It's just kind of the hovering parent who's always protecting their kid from the effects of the world. That seems like to me like impoverished in a way, impoverished parenting. I'm doing what only God can do. Yeah, I'm doing what only God can protect your kid as they walk to school.
Right.
I mean, I can't protect my kid from the effect of the fall. I mean, I can't protect them from everything that's going to come to them. So I love that. That word to me is vivid. I mean, it resonates to me. This idea of our theology is good on paper, but when we come to, we have a scarcity mindset, an impoverished mindset. And like you said, it starts with a new mindset that I think is centered around, what I hear you saying is centered around letting God be God and just being okay with it.
Of our mind. Think about that. Is that like you are a new creation and you are becoming a new creation. I'm becoming a new creation as I act. And we talk about clarity has to lead to courage. New awareness has to lead to new action or it produces nothing. And so, man, in that moment, that's why I love coaching is because it creates new awareness. It's like, so what are you going to do about it? That's my best question. That's the one bullet in the gun. Is literally, so what are you going to do about it? And then to be able to ask someone, it's like, man, I'm becoming a new creation. It turns out I'm learning to rest. It turns out if you can't handle your phone and scrolling, give it to your wife and tell her to hide it. Do I care that much about? I do. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, it turns out it's great to be off my phone.
Yeah, that's right. Well, let's come in for a landing on this. Before I'm going to ask you this final question, I want to give space for someone who's listening to this and they say, hey, I want to know more what Alan's talking about. I want to dig deeper into this. Maybe if they feel convicted or whatever the language would be around it, they feel sad, they feel whatever.
You're crying in a corner.
You're just crying. You're feeling any emotion around this. You're in the process of releasing this book. And I think it's really important. Actually, I thumbed through this in the last couple of days, didn't have time to read it all. And just the little that I was reading was like, oh, I was feeling that sense of.
It's not a feel-good book.
No, it's really not. It's not
helpful. It's helpful.
It's not a feel-bad book though. Yeah. It feels really practical in our society right now. And I'm a leader. I mean, I represent a huge movement of individuals that are passionate in the ministry. And I'm reading this and thinking, man, I know 20 people that I think probably more than that, probably 1,000 people in our context that would actually benefit from this. If somebody wanted to get their hands on this book or they wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do that?
Yeah, I'd say, first of all, just head to Amazon. There's AntiBurnoutBook.com. And we actually put video series together have summaries around it. And we're giving that away for free. Honestly, to me, this is an extension of coaching. And one of the things that grieves me is that the limitations, like we have to realize that the limitations are actually a gift to us, whether they're our kids or like this book will go places, it already has in the last few weeks, that I can never go myself.
Right.
And the reality is coaching's expensive, requires a lot of energy from me and time and money and the investment there. And so the question was, how do we put a coaching experience into a book of QR codes that lead to tools? Because we are a dependency culture in many ways. We try to get people hooked on us. The reality is we need to be about empowerment, right? Empowerment out in the field, whether we are in the bush somewhere,
yeah that's right.
Working in a village, or we are with leaders, is I want to empower leaders through our best stuff. So we put our best stuff in here. And our whole team is like, man, how do we create an experience that's empowering that you may never need to reach out? Now, if your life's being changed by this, sure, reach out and encourage us. But like, you don't need us if you have these. You're guided by the Spirit. And also, I've stripped away so much of the religious language because I want to get into boardrooms. Because to me, the boardroom is the ultimate closed country.
Yeah,
because a Christian
well said.
CEO or somebody doing community development or somebody who's a principal, these are real friends of mine. And I go, they cannot take this to their team if it's called leading in the way of Jesus.
Yeah.
They're not going to take that to their team.
Right.
In a culture that's easily offended before we even enter their room. I want this to go places that I can't.
Yeah.
And then people go, man, there's like sprinkling of salt here. Not dumping salt on this. And so there's plenty of Christian spiritual formation books and things like that. This is not one of them. In fact, a leader reached out and said, I'm doing a series on Sabbath. Should I, read your book as the primary source for this? I said, no.
Wow.
That's not what it's generally there for. It's for the pulpit. It's for the leader that's going, man, I think we could do this differently because we have a pain point in the world, which means we have an opportunity, is that we can work backwards to say, like, how's that working for you? Like this overwhelm culturally, how's that working for you? Working 80 hours a week to just try to be good enough. Like, is that working well for you, CEO or mom or dad? At the end of the day, we are exhausted and overwhelmed and we are ready for a different way. And it turns out there's this lighter way to live and lead that Jesus talked about. And so I want to lead people backwards into this journey to go like, man, it's right there. And like, maybe, just maybe, the people of Jesus have an answer for me.
I just hear you speaking of a paradigm shift, that you're catalyzing, literally, excuse me, catalyzing a paradigm shift. You probably wouldn't use those words, but to me, that's what I'm thinking.
I do.
Of.
There's 7 of them.
Nice.
100%.
Awesome. Come on.
I'm trying to shift you. I'm trying to change you,
awesome.
in this, because I've experienced it, not because I'm an expert, because I'm just like, dude, it's right in front of our face.
Yeah.
And again, if we're people of Jesus, we need a robust theology of rest and a robust theology of work. Those two go together. I think you can't have one, by the way, without the other. But in this book, I would just say, like, culturally, we have an issue. And that's where I start in the beginning. Like, first 2 chapters are pretty rough, man.
Yeah.
We have an issue, and we can either choose to pay attention to it or not. It's a meaning issue, and it's an identity issue in our culture. This is where we shine as the people of Jesus.
Whoa. You have a podcast. I've listened to numerous episodes of your podcast. Enjoy it. Speak to that for a second. Speak to practically the places. We'll put this in the show notes so people can go click. I'm that kind of guy. Like, I won't remember what you say here, but I'll go click on the notes. But just give a little bit of a, what's the doorway that people can walk through if they want some of this stuff.
Yeah, again, a book, it's on Audible as well. And some people like listening to it as you go. I'm a kinesthetic
I would like that.
learner, so that to me is great. Stay Forth Leadership Podcast. It's interesting. I actually wrote a book called Staying is the New Going, which does not mean that I'm not a fan of global missions. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But it's like, I'm here in this place and I have so much impact right around me and possibility that I'm likely to go, no, the real heroes are missionaries, overseas. The real heroes are these people. Incredible anti-sex trafficking work. Like,
yeah, that's right.
I feel like a little kid sometimes when I hear some of the things people are doing. Like, oh, I'm shifting nations and governments, and I'm like, I'm helping leaders. Like, what is that? So I just think that's what we talk about there. Anything related to how do you stay well? And so the organization started is called Stay Forth, because the idea is if I go here, it'll fix my problems. I'll move on to the next promotion, the next place, the next missions assignment, the next country. No, our problems travel really well with us in our suitcases, unfortunately. And so it's a call to faithfulness right here in the moment. And that's going to look different for you than it does for me, than it does for any of our listeners. So that's at the heart of everything I want to do is, yes, it's about health, but it's actually about faithfulness. How do we stay faithful for the long haul? Because our cultural arc of doing this is not working.
Okay, let's land the plane with this. We finished.
We're circling the runway continuously.
That's me. I could talk for hours. So I could ask. Especially with what you're talking about, it's so personally relevant. So I'm just going to keep asking you questions if I don't land the plane. We end every one of these podcasts the same way, and it really centers around this idea of carrying Christ. A little bit of the backstory of that, as I was going through the checkout stand at Safeway down by my house, and this one day, and there was a Time magazine sitting there, and I'm fairly impulsive as it is, and there's this Time magazine said it was Mother Teresa. It was a whole episode dedicated to Mother Teresa. Of course, I admire Mother Teresa, and so I'm looking at this Time. I grab it, throw it on the belt, check out. The next morning, I'm up having my quiet time, just sitting with the Lord, and I'm like, I'm feeling drawn. Read this Time magazine. So I read the thing from front to back, and so many things I could speak to, just the beauty of her story. But there gets to a point in that where it says it's speaking to her life message or her life vision. And I'm summarizing it for the most part, but it said that she felt called to carry Christ to the most marginalized and outcast of society. And as I read that, of course, the outcast and marginalized stuck out to me. But actually, that language, in light of her story, to carry Christ,
so good,
really just jumped off the page to me. It's become really our lingua franca at Every Home for Christ. Our vision statement is to carry Christ to every person in every place in every generation. But this idea, carry Christ. And so I always finish the podcast asking our guest, what does that term mean to you? There's no right or wrong answer. But when I say carry Christ, what comes to your mind right off the bat?
If we can be who God has uniquely designed us to be, I don't know a more winsome thing in this world. So I want to see leaders who are being who God uniquely designed them to be. Because when we recognize that in community, Tanner, then we literally go, I don't want to be that, but that actually inspires me and gives me the courage to be who God designed me to be. And so we all feel like a freak at some level, to go like, I don't know, who am I to whatever, lead an organization at this, like we all feel it. Like, let's just stop pretending that we're all completely secure in that. And then there's just this beauty when we live in our unique design, our spiritual fingerprint. And I even like a bit of a commissioning maybe at the end of this is that we desperately need healthy, wholehearted leaders who are lighting the pathway forward with lanterns of hope and optimism, not fear and outrage. Not fear and outrage. Here in the U.S., we are in election season. And friends, I don't know anything. Hey, guess what? We're in election season. I don't know anything less winsome than us being so afraid of Rome. I mean, of what is happening in Washington, D.C., that we forget that there is a kingdom and there is a king and that he is inviting us into and already has into the good life. Friends, we have to stop living in fear and outrage and the invitation into hope, into optimism, because we are living healthy and wholehearted. My friends, we need more of that.
Alan, such a good answer. I mean, I love that question because everybody gives a different answer. And I love the ambiguity of a term like that because it speaks to just everyone's individual journey and the way that they process life. So, Alan, thanks for your time. Actually, thanks for your ministry. Thanks for being trustworthy. This whole conversation, I'm just sitting here thinking, Alan is so trustworthy. Even as you speak, he's really right. That's a gift that you have. And so I'm excited, actually genuinely excited about this book. It's a book that I'm going to read from the beginning to the end. I'd encourage anybody watching this, just pick something up, especially if you're feeling like you're on the verge, on the journey towards burnout, or maybe you're just there. I'm excited about the practical reality of this, or the
Yeah.
paradigm shifts that will come
Sure.
with this.
Absolutely. And I think my promise to anybody reading this is that you can give it to any friend and it will apply.
That's
And I had to do a lot of digging work to make sure that that's true. And no lazy statements in there where you just throw God out there in ways he's not intended to. And so I
No
promise
lazy
you that whether
statements.
you're working in education or community development or healthcare, to read this with somebody
Yeah.
is to say, like, I want to empower you to be able to have the right conversation. And it's pretty hard to go, hey, Tanner, I think you're burning out. But it's pretty easy to read a book together and to have me be the bad guy. So, man, if I can be your partner in this and helping other people, whatever sphere you're in, that's the point of this book.
That's awesome. Alan, thank you. Thanks for your time. Thanks for tuning in. Amen.
Bro, another pod in the books. This was a good one.
So good.
I think you met someone that matched, maybe even went above your energy level. I was watching it going like, oh, Tanner's met his match here.
I think
like,
he was saying stuff that was hitting me right between right in the temple, you know.
Yeah.
I just think he is saying a message that's really relevant, I think, to normal people, but
Yeah.
also to leaders. And so I kept saying, like, if you're listening to this and your chest is burning, you probably need to read it. And I was saying that because I think
It
my
looked like
chest
it-
was burning.
I know. I was sitting in the other room. My chest was burning. Just again, that invitation to a healthy soul. That relationship of work and rest. It just feels so. It feels so right.
Yeah.
To not divorce those things. I mean, it reminds me of our conversation on the pod and just our conversations often, but such a cool guest, man. I love his passion. And one thing that struck me was his like desire to not have people overly attached to him, but to just give that message. That feels like such a, I don't know if that's our generation or just good. It just feels good to like have people be like, hey, I just want people to thrive and grow and like be who God called them to be, and not like join my 12-step $39.99 a month, whatever. If people have that, that's fine too. But really, just pure heart. And
I think I really hope someone listening to that, though, goes and gets some of the resources.
Serious.
I mean, I'm not just saying that because I'm trying to, promote his thing. I genuinely was sitting there thinking, man, people need help here, and this book's so practical.
oh no, I need a copy.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Amen.
good pod.
Redeeming Missions is brought to you by Every Home for Christ, a global network of local catalysts, inspiring and empowering the church to carry Christ to everyone, everywhere, in every generation. We have teams in over 155 nations, partnering with local churches and believers to make sure no one gets left behind or overlooked. Because the good news of the gospel is for every person on earth. We're not just doing this for the numbers, we're here for the body of Christ worldwide, and that includes you. Every single believer is uniquely called to carry Christ to our world, and it's going to take all of us. Find out more and join us today at everyhome.org.